Yay, hello. Here we go for our first new look Health, Heal, Thrive live podcast. So, to keep me in the interview game, because I love the interviews, but just finding, all the editing and all the stuff that goes with it just a little bit onerous. So, I don't have the time for it now, but I just love talking to people, particularly people like Kelsey. And I sort of thought, well, why not do this? And I've invited my groups, so my wonderful members of Thrive Time, wonderful members of the Art of Thriving, and Kelsey's invited her tribe to come along as well. And hopefully there'll be some questions that she can answer. We can make it really interactive, and then it will be released in a couple of weeks, as is, to the public. So Alison's here already. Kelsey, Alison,
Hello,
Buchalter.
Alison.
She can't wait to hear this, of course. So let me just introduce Kelsey to you, who those of you who don't know her. So Kelsey Buchalter, did I say that right?
Buchalter. So
Oh, it's got
I know, pretend there's like popcorn stuck in the back of your throat. Not that you eat popcorn, but just.
so Buchalter. I won't. I'm embarrass myself. But Kelsey is the Nutrition Network practitioner, a metabolic health coach, the host of the Human Theatre podcast, one to check out if you haven't checked it out, a TEDx speaker, a singer, a singer-songwriter, and an actor. After navigating her way through severe anorexia, bulimia, and anxiety, she has become passionately outspoken about lifestyle interventions in the prevention and treatment of chronic dis-ease. Her biggest inspiration is the body's innate ability to heal itself when put in the right environment to do so. Our birthright is optimal health, and Kelsey has made it her life's mission to help others curate their bio-individual optimal lives. What a beautiful introduction, and welcome, Kelsey, to Health Heal Thrive.
Thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor to be here.
Oh, it's awesome, and thank you for being so brave. And you didn't even have to think about it. I just asked you, and you said, yes, but to do this live, sometimes our mind can kind of, think it's a bit scarier, but actually, I find it to be a lot warmer, and really fun. So I'm thrilled that you're here. So I had the honor of meeting you during the recent Nutrition Network Practitioners Coach Practitioner program that you did, and found your energy and warmth totally engaging, and you did so amazingly well in the course. Um, and I just think that this is just a huge, huge start. You are going to do amazing things to help people, particularly because of your incredible healing story that you've had. And you're quite young. Can I ask you a rude question and just ask you how old you are, Kelsey?
I am 28.
Well, isn't it amazing to have the knowledge that you've got at 28? Because I think it's actually quite rare. For me, it was 40 when things went south. And for a lot of people, it's even much older. But probably, there might be a time when you can look back on what happened to you as maybe a gift, that it's actually directed you to the knowledge that you now have.
Oh yeah, 100%. I I always say I joke around a little bit and say that I've had my midlife crisis done and over with, and now I'm like I'm living. But I honestly, even though I wouldn't wish what I had been through on anyone, I just live with so much gratitude for it, because indeed it has gifted me with knowing what I know, and like continuing the journey of wanting to know and wanting to help and wanting to learn and all the things. So yeah, really, not a day goes by that I don't have exceptional gratitude just for being alive.
Mm,
So yeah.
amazing. So tell us a little bit about where you are in the world, and also what does a typical day look like for you, Kelsey, now?
Sure. Well, of course, I mean, life is always evolving and we're changing, but yes, right now I am currently in Cape Town, South Africa. I've been born and bred here. And a typical day, while I'm still, as I've alluded to, I feel like I've gotten a second chance at life. So I'm still, I suppose, trying to make sense and trying to find my feet. I have a diverse background of sort of like academic things, in that I have come to learn that I'm a multi-passionate person. So I've got the creative side with my singing and songwriting and acting and performing. And then I also have the more like academic, nutritional, metabolic health side. So, I embarked on our NNP certification program, which is where I met you and was honored to have been lectured by you. So yeah, as a nutrition network practitioner and metabolic health coach, I'm also trying to like build my clientele. But being sort of like an independent worker in that I kind of work for myself every day kind of looks different, and it kind of depends. I also have my own podcast, as you've already said. So it's either interviews or it's editing or it's posting or it's video editing for the podcast, or it's going to castings or auditions or having rehearsals if there's like a shoot or a film or something. And then it's also like, meeting and teaching with, teaching clients and group classes that I do. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit all sorts, but I do have my mainstays during the day, and that is my morning routine. That is always, it's like a non-negotiable for me. So I have my morning routine, and I also kind of have like my bedtime routine. So with those two things always set in place, the rest of the day is kind of like, okay, well, it is what it is today, and let's get through what is planned and what is scheduled for the day. And then as much as possible, I try to be as much as possible. I try to be outside. So, yeah, if that means squeezing in a walk here and there, that's also kind of like my release. So I can't give you an exact day of what it exactly looks like because every day is so different. But I do have my non-negotiables, and that is with my morning routine, and my non-negotiables with my food and nourishing my body, so I can therefore be performing at my quote unquote optimal, even though that's always changing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the non-negotiables. It is so far ahead, of certainly me, in figuring that stuff out and really, I guess, giving ourselves permission to have these things that matter to us, that are important to how we feel and a part of self-care. What are you able to share a little bit about, certainly the morning? What are those non-negotiables and what do they bring you? Why are they so important for you to do?
Sure. So I have always been someone who I wake up and all my energy is there. Like I am definitely a morning person. So I
Don't
love
hate her, everybody.
I get up really early, but I also go to bed really early. So you can laugh
Yeah.
at me too. I could be a
Yeah.
grandma to some people. um, but I love the early morning, especially when no one else is awake. Like it's my
Mm.
when you hear like the birds start to like chirp, it's just like such a beautiful time of day to just like restart. So I know that Angie Huberman has spoken a lot about waiting 90 minutes to have your coffee, but then I've also heard counter views, which are, yeah, they're counter opinions to everything. But anyway, what works for me is
Everything.
I wake up, I drink a glass of water because of course it's important to hydrate yourself. And then I begin to make my coffee. I love having a bulletproof in the morning.
Okay.
I do eat earlier on in the day as well, just being a morning person, and I try to optimize as much as I possibly can for sleep and circadian health. So I am someone who just struggle to fall asleep if I have a full stomach. So I definitely
Mm.
eat my calories when the sun is out. That's kind of like how I like to, what I found really suits me. So in that regard, when I wake up, I am quite, I definitely feel like my body needs some calories or something. So that's why I love a bulletproof. And I also enjoy a bulletproof because I kind of use it as my pre-workout. I
Mm-hmm.
don't enjoy working out if I have just eaten. I think with my past with the anorexia and bulimia, I also have a very sensitive gut. So it does take, like slow transit issues. Yeah, I'm going to be open and honest with you. Gut health is unfortunately something that takes a huge toll. Just with stress
Mm.
alone, but specifically when you've had bulimia and anorexia. So my
Mm.
gut health is definitely something that I probably will always, well, not always, I don't want to say always, but it's definitely something that still isn't quote unquote optimal, and I'm not sure if it ever will get back to like where it should be, just because of all
Mm.
the damage I've already done, but I'm doing my best. So
Yeah.
all of that to say is that I do need some calories in me before I go and work out, because I find it less stressful, and I think definitely much more conducive to being compassionate to my young female reproductive
Mm-hmm.
body to have some calories and not just have black coffee. So I'm going into a lot of detail. You can tell me not to detail all these things, but
No, I
yeah. So I
love
have
it. I
my
love it. And people watching, if you've got questions, please put them in the
Yeah,
comments
please ask.
because, yeah, you've got an incredible lady here with a huge amount of knowledge, and I'm very open to sharing. But please keep going. This is exactly what I want to know because then
Sure.
we can change the direction of the conversation a
For
little.
sure, for sure. So yeah, I have my bulletproof because I struggle to exercise after I've eaten, but I do need some calories. So I use MCT oil in my bulletproof, and then I drink that. I then like take some time to just like reground, recenter, take in the sunrise, and then I do a workout. And then after that, I smash a heavy carnivore protein meal.
Like a
And
beautiful
then
steak.
yeah, like a big steak or beef short ribs or yeah,
Yum.
whatever. I mean, I eat the rainbow of meats. So yeah. And then yeah, then I get on with my day and whatever it I suppose entails.
Hmm.
And then the evening routine is really just like as soon as the sun's setting, I put my blue blockers on, which you're wearing like right now. And then I start winding down. I put my phone away like a minimum an hour before bed. And
Hmm.
in that hour, I'm trying, well, I don't turn on the lights around me. So I'm showering in the dark or getting ready. And then
Candles? Do you put candles? I've got candles in my
sometimes
bathroom
Sometimes I do.
now.
Sometimes I'm sometimes I'm a little bit lazy. And I just kind of lean on my eyesight to get me around. But I think it's like
It's good,
muscle
isn't
memory
it?
now. Yeah. It's muscle memory now. I
Exactly.
can like visualize where things are. Um
Like
and
everything,
yeah.
we've just gotten so used to just taking the easy path, and I talk to my kids all the time because they think I'm a cuckoo mum, but they love me really. But I'm like they turn the light on. I'm like, you don't need the light on. Use your eyes. Try and use them. The more you use them, the stronger they're going to be. Like anything. I've got a question here from Alison. I'm going to put it
Yes.
across. She
What
wants to know
sort of
what sort of
workout?
workout you do.
Ooh, I enjoy this one because it's always changing. So I kind of do one day on, one day off, and one day on meaning one day with some resistance like training, strength training. I think that's exceptionally important for all of us because muscle is the organ of longevity. So I do one day of strength training, and then the next day it's kind of like gentler, sort of like Pilates or yoga. Um, at the moment, I'm really enjoying like doing a very short strength workout and then ending that with yoga because I'm finding firstly the strength paired with my yoga. I've always done yoga. I've done a yoga practitioner's course, is something that I did quite a long time ago. So it's always been part of my like routine here and there. But I found that since I've added in my strength training, I cannot tell you how much better my body feels and how much stronger it feels within the yoga and the Pilates that I'm doing. So
Hmm.
that's kind of where I'm at right now. I used to
That's
be,
interesting. Can I
yeah,
just interrupt you just
yeah,
with
of
that? Because
course.
I know a lot of people that do yoga and Pilates and they think that's kind of enough strength training. So you're saying that you're actually increasing your strength by doing resistance training as well as those things.
Yes.
Do you think on their
Yeah, yeah.
own they're not really enough?
Yoga and Pilates.
Mm.
I think they are definitely. I mean, look, I think that in an ideal world, one would be doing both because I think all forms of exercise, like aerobic, hits, plyometrics, balance yoga, and then strength training. I think they all have their place. I There is a lot of strength based yoga, like yoga. There's a lot of different types of yoga, and I
Mm.
tend to enjoy the more vigorous strength based types of yoga. But there is, I mean, any time that you're using your body, even if it's body weight, like a chaturanga, which is basically like a push up or a
Yeah.
tricep push up, I mean, that's body weight work. So I do think that, for especially females, maybe like in their perimenopausal years, I do think if they're doing yoga and Pilates, I think that is technically enough because it is a lot of body weight work. But of course,
Mm.
if you're able to include some more resistance training and a little bit more strength focused things, then you can only better, I suppose. But
Yeah.
there are lots of lunges in yoga and even Pilates, and yeah, I mean, you're still using your body. I think anything that you can do is better than nothing. And
Mm. Mm.
obviously don't, I know it's easier to conceptualize, but don't let perfect be the enemy of good. I still think that if someone is doing Pilates and yoga consistent, it's really about being consistent.
Yeah,
Because, I mean, for
exactly.
example, with perimenopause, I've just done a whole research paper with a brain health course that I was doing. Um, with perimenopause, it's like, for example, each mode of exercise has their amazing place for the female, especially during the menopausal transition, where there are a lot of symptoms. And I know that like the sort of like flexibility and yoga, Pilates type of training is really helpful for sleep and stress
Mm-hmm.
management.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, those are essential when females are transitioning into the
Mm.
postmenopausal state.
Yeah,
So, yeah, there's a
I
time and place for
agree.
everything.
Yeah, and I love how you said you vary it up. I mean, it's very much the same as me. I think I just have fallen into that over the years, and it's something every day, even if it's just a walk, but the strength stuff every second day. Yoga, something I must admit, at 51, I'm probably not going to do. I think I've tried it a few times, and I need you here in Melbourne to teach teach
For
me how to do it
sure, for
properly.
sure. Yeah.
But I think it's my goal this year is even like my first chin up. I've never been able to do a chin up, so I've been doing a lot of dead hangs and just really starting to build up my strength like that. And again, it's just we've got to realize as we age, it's so important. I mean, there's a bit of an age gap between us, and I not that that matters, but I just think we can easily lose sight of that being an important priority. So I love how you've said that, and or just the way that you've put it into context, because you're right. It's not about being perfect. It's about consistency. It's about doing what you can, but doing it from a place of love because you love, yourself and you want to be strong. And, knowing that the earlier we start, the better. I mean, if you're 70, you've still got time. You're here. But the foundations that we can put in place, by what you're doing now, it's just phenomenal. And your morning routine, I asked you because I could see you wearing blue blockers. I had an inkling you had the circadian knowledge, and I'm literally only in the last 6 to 12 months, opening my mind and learning all of that. And it's just changed my life again, phenomenally. And that connection with nature and, just our humanness, it's just it's amazing. And for me that's the same. Like, it's a non-negotiable. That's how I start my day as well. And I can't control with 5 kids what goes on in the middle of it, and with work and everything else, but my top and tail, they are mine. And I've had to be really clear that they are mine, and it's
Mm.
okay to do that. It's okay to do that.
Yeah, I think it's very the word selfish has a negative connotation, but it's really not. I think just going back to, and this is actually very deeply ingrained in the yoga philosophy, but service to self is service to others. Like, you can't
Yeah.
expect yourself to be participating functionally in society if you are empty. And
Yeah.
so, we do have to prioritize these things. And I say this with a lot of sensitivity because, again, like, mentally, I've really struggled a lot in my life. And I can tell you, I've been in and out of clinics and hospitals and psychiatric programs, and each and every one of those programs did have something in common. And I think it was a very, very important lesson, and that is to prioritize and conserve yourself. In that,
Mm.
if you need to set boundaries to be able to preserve your sanity, you need to do that. And I think for a lot of people, especially when they've had mental health struggles, it can be, especially to those close to them, it can be quite a whoa. Like, all of a sudden they're like laying these boundaries, they're being assertive. Like, who is this person? And it can be quite a scary process to go through, and quite a daunting process to go through. But, like, one of the biggest revelations that I learned is that you kind of have to be selfish, and that's not a bad thing. If
Yeah.
you want to not suffer, you have to do the things that fulfill you. Um, of course, as long as it's coming from a genuinely truthful, great intention,
Mm.
self-compassionate place.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, especially for those who have struggled in the past, they can be people pleasers, and they can be a lot more sensitive. So beginning to be assertive and to lay those boundaries is still something
It's
that
hard.
it's a whole metamorphosis.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it is something that obviously the more we confront, it does get easier.
Yeah.
It is that, just that it is a beautiful way of describing it, a metamorphosis. It's really what it is. And from my perspective, being a mum, I was people pleaser too. You know, I mean, the whole process of my life change has been to stand in my truth and stand who I am. And I think it's actually the best gift I've given myself, but also my children, because I've you know, really empowered them to be okay with doing that for themselves as well. And I'm not sure where we sort of got it wrong, that particularly women had to put ourselves last all the time. And I don't
Mm.
know that that's necessarily the best thing for us. But yeah, I'd love to sort of take it now down to your obviously traumatic past, and you know, you've shared with me that you're happy to, you know, to really talk about it. I'd love to know from you just how it started and where it all started.
I wish I had a straightforward answer for you, but to be honest, I have only ever known myself to be extremely anxious, shy, very, very insecure, like from the get go. I mean, there's a lot to say, I'm sure, about, when I was still in the womb and just, yeah, intergenerational trauma. That's a big thing as well. I know Gabor Mate speaks a lot about it. So yeah, there's that, which is technically out of my control. I also know that I was, born cesarean, so I didn't necessarily have the strong like gut microbiome. So there's like a whole lot of different hypotheses that I have, and I don't necessarily have one answer. But yeah, as I sort of said, I've kind of only ever known suffering in internally, even though on the outside there was nothing that I should have ever been so anxious and insecure about. Honestly, I know that, I intellectually genuinely know that. And this is
Mm.
where it kind of leads me to, for me in my case, because I'm not refuting situational anxiety and depression after like a big traumatic event, in that I didn't necessarily have this one big traumatic event that just perpetuated all of my suffering. As I said, I've kind of only ever known it, and that has kind of I mean, of course I've had like traumas here and there. No one comes unscathed in this world, so of course there've been traumas and things that have definitely contributed. But ultimately, what I've come to understand, and what I'm resonating the most with, is that I clearly, from the get go, just had a whole lot of neuro and gut inflammation. And of course, there is a major symbiotic relationship between the gut and the brain, the gut brain axis. Essentially, the gut is the first brain. And it's probably why I found such benefit from a carnivore diet, because I kind of got rid of any inflammatory foods that could be triggering my gut and all of this neuroinflammation. So I have come to understand that yeah, on a biological level, I was inflamed um, on so many levels. And of course, I wish I knew then what I know now. But as a young kid, I also always used to get sick. So I was on, from a young girl, like I was basically in the standard of care, be it through psychotherapy or just a physician, a specialist physician, in which I've been to all of the specialist physicians. I've even been for MRIs to see if there was literally something wrong with my brain. But yeah, I mean, I used to get like chronic ear infections and strep throat and all the things. Like, so I've been on many, like from a young girl, so many rounds of antibiotics, and we know what that does to the gut. So I just think I was the perfect storm in so many different aspects to be super predisposed to eventually this like extreme manifestation of like acute severe anorexia. And it was kind of like, as I've sort of said, it was a lifelong struggle. I've always had issues with my body and eating, and always restricting and then binging and then purging and then all the things. But yeah, it kind of led to this one point where after school, the S hit the fan. And I think, given that I was now out of a structured environment and
Mm.
now in the world to do like, and realizing that the whole world is out there for me, like the world's my oyster, I just crumbled, and crumbled really, really hardcore, to the point where basically was like on my deathbed. So that's where it got like really, really bad, even though I had been struggling all along, but it was kind of like relatively ish contained. Um, so yeah, I would say like my worst years were actually after school. Um, and yeah, I've kind of taken myself off on such a tangent, so you can bring me back to the main question.
Well, no, it was just, I think it was just sort of how it started. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, you know, it's interesting that you say, I mean, there was never one thing, you know, I think it is always probably a cumulative thing. And yeah, the trauma is, people don't realize that trauma is, it's very much a part of most people's world in some way, shape, or form, because trauma is the way we see anything. It's not really the event, it's just the way that we've taken it on. And um I guess I'd love to know, at what point, I don't know, like, when did things start to turn better?
Turn better.
Yeah.
Um, I honestly think it was when I had my first carnivore meal, and that was in 2018.
So were you not eating meat at all? Were you vegan? Did you follow, like, was there a whole lot of food rules, or you just didn't want food, or how did that look?
There was both. It was honestly
Both.
both. Like
Okay.
I had glorified and wanted to be anorexic from basically I started ballet at 3 years old. So that probably was
Oh,
also a contributing factor.
okay.
And I always, I mean, my literal like visions that I have of ballet is just like me comparing my body to everyone else. And like
Oh,
this was
wow.
at 3 years old. So
Gosh.
yeah,
Yeah.
very, very body aware. And also because I was often so sick with like chronic headaches or the next ear infection, like I was always in a doctor's office. Like every week I was in a different doctor's office. And so like from a very young age, I kind of like was forced to like be body aware, and like listen and like be in tune with my body, which I'm grateful for sure. Like I'm very, very in tune with my body. But yeah, sorry, you had asked me when did things start getting better, and I said
Mm,
2018 with my first
mm,
carnivore meal. Oh, and then you'd asked
mm.
me about the food. During my yoga instructor's course, I did go for a stint being vegan, but it didn't last very long because I was just so hungry. I was so hungry, I couldn't stop eating. Um, no, I mean, I'd always eaten. I mean, I'd always loved meat, honestly. Like growing up in South Africa as well, the meat is so good here. So I have always loved meat. I was familiar with Prof Tim Noakes's work when it started. I think like it was about 2015-ish that I became familiar with his work, and the
Mm-hmm.
only reason that I became familiar with it was because my dad is an optometrist, and he sees a lot of diabetic patients, specifically type 2 diabetic patients.
Okay.
So he was very much on the pulse with that for his patients, and I was just like I never like fully implemented it. With my like major IBS symptoms that I was having, I had been going to a dietitian, and she had at least told me about gluten free. And that really did help me already. Then I kind of like transitioned into FODMAP, and then that kind of went into like a Banting diet, so like a low carb or like paleo first, then like lower carb, all the while still struggling with anorexia and bulimia, like binging and purging all the time. And then I would say, like, when I was severely anorexic, I feared fat so much that I was basically just
Mm,
like protein, but like lean protein. And then, like,
okay.
even the green list, like, I was so overwhelmed with decision fatigue of like which like green like low starchy vegetables I
Mm,
should choose. I kind of just like was so scared of like the choice. It was like the paradox of choice that I was just like it was so overwhelming and so crippling for me. And that's another reason why I think carnivore just liberated me, because there was like
mm,
less choice. I mean, even though there's still so much choice, but like less, it just like narrowed it down, and like it was just so much. Yeah, in through the lens of decision fatigue, it was a game changer for me, and it really did liberate things. So yeah, it was kind of like a virtually just like lean protein, nothing diet
okay.
beforehand, but like still very definitely not eating sufficient calories, clearly.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting when you know those, I don't know if you get the programs over there, but those Alone series where they put people in the wild and they have to kind
Oh
of,
yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's just such a great program to see what happens when we don't get enough fat. They try and, well, first of all, if they don't eat meat, they end up starving and end up having to get out. But also the fat, and it's interesting because as a society, obviously we've been so, it's been so vilified, and become so afraid of it, but it's so functionally important to our brain and our whole body, particularly for women, I think. Oh
Oh
gosh.
yeah. Oh yeah.
So when you had that, how did the liberation come? Like, who actually said to you, it's okay to just eat meat?
Sure. So in the midst of the anorexia, like I just come out of I think my second institution, and I was going downhill again, and the threat of another one, which did eventually happen, was happening. And I just didn't want to go into another hospital or a clinic. So I kind of like was desperate, and at least I really really wanted to find someone who at least was familiar with low carb. Long story
Mm.
short, a friend of mine who I knew was on a low carb diet had told me about a health coach that she had gone to, and apparently this health coach knew um, low carb at least. So that was a green flag for me. And so I went to her, and it was like a 3 hour session. And at the end
Oh,
of the
wow.
session, she said, I know this woman was yeah, a huge guiding light for me. At the end of the session, she said, this is like out of nowhere, like food had not been really spoken about. She said, Kelsey, for the next 10 days, you're going to eat red meat, eggs, salt, and water. And just something lit up inside of my brain when she said that to me. I was like, this, it was kind of like a deja vu moment. Just like, this makes so much sense. I feel like I've like known this all my life type of thing. Like, I just knew something about this. And it kind of like even though we shouldn't necessarily and we can't ever rely on someone else external to give us permission, but I got this sign, a very visceral sign of like, this is your permission to
Yeah.
go and eat these foods. And I also think the reason why carnivore worked so well for me is that as I said earlier, like I naturally have always loved meat
Mm.
and fat. So it's
Mm.
always been what my body has craved. So I just like,
Sometimes
yeah,
we get so hot. We're in so much peril though. Like, the permission from somebody around us is what we need to see that we
yeah.
can. I mean, I think particularly when it's around something that we fear, when it's wrongly, I mean, meat. It's actually happened to me with a few clients just saying, really, I really want to eat meat, but I'm not. I'm like, you can eat meat. Meat's nutritious. This is why, and look at this, and I want you to, you can eat as much as you like, and it is just that. Oh, it is okay because I'm so, my belief is that it's just not.
Yeah.
So I get that. I think we can give people with that, but I mean, once you see that, I'm sure you were off after that. I heard you your interview with Dr. Anthony Chafee, and you were saying that once you started to eat this way, it was almost like your mind opened up to absorb and to start to take on all the years of psychotherapy and all the learning that you had. Is that can you explain how that happened
Sure.
for you?
So as I said, I had been to like every specialist physician under the sun. I'd been to psychotherapy from a very young girl, sometimes twice a week. Psychiatrists, I tried all the antidepressants, all the medications, and yet I was still struggling. And this is where I'm very vocal about hopefully one day the conventional paradigm of treating eating disorders or any acute psychiatric illness specifically really does change. But once I began to nourish my cells with the nourishment that it needed, so i.e., eating nourishing, bioavailable, nutrient dense foods, and basically fixing my biology first, I basically stabilized physiologically. And from that moment, I was then able to apply all of the years of psychotherapy, and they were 20 plus years of psychotherapy. It was
Wow.
remarkable. It's like I've come to sort of label it as like reverse engineering my mental health.
Mm,
And I always cite this quote that Dr. Daniel Amen has, and he compares the human body to the hardware of a computer and the human psychology to the software of a computer. And how can you expect the software to be functioning optimally if the hardware is beaten and battered? So a lot of the
mm,
time, people just and I'm still ambivalent if I like the term mental health or not, because I don't think we can compartmentalize the human body. But and I don't know if mental health as a term has done disservice to people, because up like beyond situational depression and anxiety, there is a huge biological component to a lot of the mental health symptoms that a lot of people are struggling with that are chronic.
mm,
um, and to sort of reverse engineer that through the biological process. And this is why I've become so outspoken and passionate about utilizing all lifestyle interventions, because ultimately, you've even said this yourself, like we are ultimately only as healthy as our mitochondria are. And not that it's the only answer. Nutrition is not the only answer. Sleep is not the only answer. Movement is not. It's all part of the puzzle.
yeah.
But like, if we can get our cells to begin to start being less inflamed and function optimally, it's just such a beautiful foundation. It actually is the foundation that you kind of need to have first and foremost before you can then get into the psychology. So yeah, once I started to actually feed myself, I had the cellular energy to actually begin the mindset work and the psychology like behind a lot of my struggles.
So is it, and I'm just asking for your opinion because I mean, we talked about before we started recording that, it's very difficult because the treatment is, it doesn't really, I mean, it doesn't look at nutrition. I mean, you were just lucky to have to cut that you came across someone that said, what about, you start eating some meat and that was your open door. But for many people, they don't come across that. And with anorexia, because there is so much fear, that it's just about eating anything, just getting in the
Mm.
calories. And, so I guess my question is, where do you think we go wrong with the current treatment? And how would you like to see it change?
I think it's such a difficult
Mm,
sort of like thing to even speak about because I understand the conventional like just prioritizing food, and I understand that there should be quote unquote no fear food. I really do understand that, in that like like we should quote unquote all be able to moderate, etc., but that's not really realistic for a lot of people. Now, treatment for some people has been the best thing that's ever happened to them, but I am one of the people, and I think a lot of people are, where treatment has not been the best thing for them. Clearly it didn't work for me, and anorexia has the highest mortality rate out of any psychiatric disorder,
mm,
so clearly
mm,
something is not working. But yeah, I think one of the big issues that I had with treatments, and again this is difficult because I can also see how this can come from a quote unquote eating disordered mind, but the food is just not conducive to health.
I believe
um
that's right. It's
it's
not.
not. It's not. Like,
Mm,
that's the matter of fact. It's
mm,
not.
mm,
And even if you don't have an eating disorder, it's not necessarily the healthiest food. I mean, if you just look at hospital food, it's the same. It's literally this. It's the same kind of. It's just like fast food. It's just like carb after carb. It's pasta. It's processed food. But
mhm.
like with anorexia specifically, like there's like a greater emphasis to have more junk food and to have the sugared peanut butter rather than the non-sugared peanut butter, because you shouldn't be fearing that, because in the conventional sort of paradigm, recovery from anorexia specifically is based on how well you're able to moderate your food, including junk food. But of course,
Really?
I actually, yeah, that's what recovery is based on, how well you can moderate even just junk food and processed foods, in that like you shouldn't be scared of eating McDonald's, basically, or you shouldn't be
Is
scared of eating a chocolate bar, which I do get because there is a restrictive component. But at the same flip of the coin, I would say that someone with anorexia like should like can't be denied of health, just
No,
like someone
because it
who's,
should be about nourishment, and
yeah,
that's just
exactly,
calories. That's just
exactly, yeah,
and isn't it interesting how that the world is so ass about face with the food that when you don't eat that stuff, I've seen dietitians, tell people they have an eating disorder if they don't eat any, carbohydrates, low carb, carnivore. I mean, it's the ultimate eating disorder because look at all the foods that, you're
yeah,
cutting
yeah.
out, and that's that's my issue too. And I get it though. I get what you're saying. And my daughter, just to tell you briefly, 3 years ago, had a period of really rough it was probably 12 to 18 months really, and she did stop eating, and I was very, very concerned about her. And actually, what got her to start eating was the threat of going to hospital, because I said to her, if you don't start eating, I'm going to have to take you to hospital. And darling, then I really have no control about how you are treated, and it will be in the conventional, sorry, put this back in the conventional system, and it'll just be it'll be very difficult. I knew that, and it was enough, thankfully, for her to start eating. And it was a long road back, but I've always with her. And I remember even, then I just wanted her to eat. And I said that to her. I said, darling, I don't care what you eat. I just want you to eat. Thankfully now, her diet's pretty good. She does eat, quite well. I mean, she's still only 20 and learning. Um, but yeah, I think it's sad that it that's the way people think, because everything in moderation, and I'm shocked really that it's not about health. It's about being able to eat all foods. I'm shocked.
Yeah, I have so much to say, but like I mean, even just like the processed carbohydrates that we were forced to eat, like what that does to your blood glucose levels, and then of course how that affects your mood. Like it's
I
just like you're
know.
basically feeding the reason why people are in a psychiatric clinic. And I'm not only speaking about anorexics now, I'm speaking about depression and anxiety. Like the foods that are given in a clinic is the same as like a hospital, like
Mm,
except probably worse. Um, but you are literally causing all of this like mood dysregulation in these people by the foods that you're giving them. So where I have, and as we said, like already, like, you know, kind of that biological stabilization and that physiological stabilization is so vital, especially in such an acute psychiatric state. I kind of like feel like in that acute phase, like it needs like the nutrition and the bioavailability of nutrients and lack of processed foods needs to be a priority to
mm,
then stabilize the patient, to get them cellularly in a place where they can then work on, you know, if they are actually psychiatric things, because most of the time a lot of the psychiatric symptoms kind of dissipate when all of the inflammation is gone anyway. So yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it?
yeah.
And it's very similar, I think, in the sugar addiction space too. In that, what we've learned from Bitten is that the therapy is it's people try and do that first, but if they don't heal the brain, which is where the illness is living and where it started, it's pointless. What does she say? It's putting the cart before the horse. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, but see, this is where I get a little bit sometimes it's tricky because I've had clients who they couldn't make a different choice with diet until they understood. So they understood thought and they understood how their mind worked and they understood that they could have a thought. And that's why I asked you before, was there a whole lot of, rules, because thought that they're thoughts, right? And we have all these rules and about what to eat and all that sort of stuff. But when I was able to help, a couple of clients I'm thinking about in particular, that they were just thoughts that they didn't have to pay attention to, then they were able, and that's not therapy, is it? That's just understanding. It wasn't therapy at all. It was just helping them understand how thought worked. And they were able then to start making different food choices. And then,
Mm.
you know, you're right. The flow on effect of that was that they were able to create space for insight. They were able to, you know, start the real healing process, I guess, that
Yeah.
the psychotherapy can give.
Yeah, I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a both and in that,
Yeah.
like, you know, what I've really come to zoom out and understand is that, like, it's really this beautiful art and science and balance of the biological and the psychological. Like, they both, it's like a dance. It's like two people dancing with each other, and it's this like ebb and flow. And, like, you know, that's kind of where, like, intuition and knowing thyself is kind of the baseline, and the inner like sort of like pull towards the magnets, in that like when you are able to be so in tune with your body, you can then know, is this a biological thing that I need to work on now, or is this more of a mindset? Like it's just this like, yeah, it's this dance between knowing there is always an underlying biological component, but also knowing that there's this power of addressing your mind and challenging your beliefs and your thoughts. And I think that's
Mm,
where people like us, like metabolic health coaches or nutrition network practitioners, are kind of the best of all worlds, in that we kind of marry those two. We marry the mindset and we marry the biology, and it's a symbiotic relationship. It's not an either or, and they're both happening at the
yes.
same time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, exactly. So you mentioned how, really in that acute phase, the nourishment needs to be a priority. What else any other sort of ways that you think, um, you know, what else could be done, for
Sure.
treatment?
Sure. I think I'm just going to go to all the pillars of health. So there's sleep,
Yeah,
there's breath work, there's
yeah.
community, there's purpose, all the things. And I think the biggest thing is that people need to know, I mean, especially when you're so downtrodden and in such a low space, we've outsourced everything to everyone
Mm,
external from us. And really, the fundamentals are these tenets of health. And they are all things that we can control. And they are all things that come within us. Like, it's basically bringing you back home to yourself and back home to your intuition. So there's so much that I think in that acute phase, from like learning how to breathe properly, just knowing how to breathe with your belly, that can be something, such a game changer. Like understanding that sleep is really important, and understanding the circadian health of it all, because like very well meaning people can be really trying to fix themselves, but it's like they're like up at like 10 o'clock at night still on their phone, and they sleep with their phone right next to their bed, etc., etc., or they're watching movies late, and that could be something. All of these things play a role. So it's the
Mm.
breath work, it's the sleep, it's the nutrition, which we've already spoken about. It's um also, I have a huge emphasis in my own sort of like practice of finding things that fuel your fire. Like, what are you passionate about? What is your purpose? Like, that is huge, because it does give meaning and clarity to your own life. And of course, these things can evolve and change all the time. And even if it's just a little hobby, like if you really enjoy painting and you maybe just take out 5 minutes of your day to do that, like all of these very useful, sort of like free, a lot of them are like free tools that I
That's
feel like
right.
we kind of have lost touch of those. We've lost touch of
Mm.
like being in tune with our bodies and just playing, and just like honestly just like being so authentic to like what we feel like doing in the moment.
Mm.
And those are all the foundations ultimately of health. So yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah,
Well, it's so true. But as I say to my group members, that we really won't fuel an economy, these things that we can do that are free. So they're probably never going
yeah,
to be, unfortunately, front and center. We have to know that. We have to understand that chaos fuels an economy.
yeah,
People, yeah. I mean, it's how it is. It's how it is. We can't change that as an individual. So we have to change ourselves. And I love how you said in your bio that it's about the environment. I talk about we're kind of all we're swimming in this dirty fishbowl, and takes a huge amount of courage to jump out, and find the clean. And that's almost, it's almost like that should be the mandatory step with anyone
mm,
suffering with, any of these conditions, physical health conditions as well. Change the environment first, and then from there, let's see, what else, if anything else is required in terms of, certainly conventional medicine. I mean, you
yeah.
can't fix this stuff with a pill.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like get the foundations working right. Like at least give yourself the best shot, where if you are going to use some pharmaceutical intervention or conventional intervention, do it from a healthier space,
Mm, mm,
Don't do
mm.
it from like your cells being sick and like, or like already not sick in a bad sense, in that like you're not broken, but like give your cells the best chance to even utilize the pharmaceutical drug, if that's going to be an intervention, because I'm not refuting that they can help and are
Mm-hmm.
needed, even if
Yeah.
acutely, in people. I'm
I
definitely
think
not
that
like bashing.
acutely is kind of really, possibly the only time. I mean, I've heard psychiatrists talk about, there are beneficial for an acute, but they're never meant to be on, these things longer term. I mean, if you are, I mean, be questioning the therapy and the treatment. If
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And we say this from love because we get it. You've been in a position, we've been there, I've been there with my daughter, and myself as well, before I saw the light. And the environmental change of changing our environment happens over a long time. Also, we don't need to make all the changes at once. We just need to start with something. And nutrition, it is a great place to start, because it does, as you said, we need everything firing. And our brain is made up, our body is made up with what we eat. And just to feel a little different, feel a little better, it just opens up our world to so many other things.
100%. And again, unfortunately, you can't put a time frame to things
Mm-mm.
like this. I
No.
kind of synonymize recovery with just life, in that it
Yeah.
is a lifelong process to keep striving towards optimal health. Like it's a moving target always. And I will be the first one to be transparent with you all in that I've only been carnivore for 6 years, and I've come such a long way, but I'm still like, this is just 6 years to be able to get me to just like, I feel like only now I'm actually starting to just stabilize and find my feet, like truly.
Beautiful.
I feel like, before carnivore, I was kind of like knocked down on the ground with a bat and kind of like unconscious. And now like it's taken 6 years to like eventually just stand up. I'm still learning. I'm not perfect and I still struggle a lot. But it's like
That's
struggling with
life.
greater insight and just much more resilience to get through.
Mm,
And I'm just grateful to be able to have that cellular strength at least to fall
mm.
back on.
Beautiful. What would you say to, say, anyone listening who might be struggling with an eating disorder? I'm pretty confident most of the people watching us will probably have some, knowledge of diet anyway.
Yeah.
But I don't know, any sort of words of wisdom, if because it can take, like, I mean, I guess my question is too, when you started eating meat, did you ever binge and purge after that, or was it, so there was many sort of setbacks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They like,
Yeah.
yeah, gosh, recovery is not linear, is what I've learned, and
Yeah.
I'm humbled by it every day. It's unfortunately it is what it is, but I think you cannot berate yourself for that because, like, yeah, I think a big lesson that I've had to learn is somehow finding some grace and forgiveness for just, the hard moments as well, and not being quote unquote perfect. But I think, you know, challenging the the belief system that you've built up is scary, but I think the most worthwhile thing you could do. And also just having that self-awareness of like, okay, why am I making this choice right now? If it's a food choice or a behavioral choice, like what are the intentions behind this? And even if you act upon it and it's not necessarily the most well-intentioned reason why you're doing it, I still think at least being honest with yourself and at least knowing that is like such a great first step, because I think that awareness over time will eventually lead you to, and this is where I love your work with the choice points. Like ultimately, we are only ever making choices that are either moving towards our goals or away from our goals. And we are all so deserving of optimal health. You are your most important person in your world, like just as important as Kim Kardashian and Kendall Jenner, and like insert any influencer or whatever, anyone you may aspire to look like or whatever. You're literally just as much a human. We're all one human species. Like at the end of the day, ultimately we all are made up of like
Mhm.
cells, etc. So we're all the same in that regard, and you are no less worthy of that optimal health. And how you get there and how is your own bio individual way, but truly you are deserving. And I think that, and holding on to that over time, accumulates into eventually an overarching, I'm going to live my life for myself. And of course, it's not, I struggle. I have days where I struggle. I have moments where I struggle a lot, but it's really about like just knowing that you really do deserve optimal health and knowing what your intentions are. I
Hmm.
think that can be really like difficult as well. Even yeah, I just keep going back to a
Mm.
quote that my best friend reminded me of the other day that I had actually sent her a few years ago. And she said, like, do you remember you sending me this quote? And I'm like, what quote? And she goes, um, if you can't do it brave, then do it scared.
Oh, love it.
And I think that's because I think especially with eating disorders, like I used to hate it when people would tell me, "Oh, you're not thinking straight because you're so undernourished," or like,
Mm.
"Oh, Kelsey, you're in denial because you're anorexic. Like, do you actually know how serious your condition is?" I'm like, "Of course I know. I can feel it. Like, I'm living in my body. I can feel how terrifying it is. Of course I
Mm.
know. I'm not blind. I can see. I can feel." Um, but I think that's where the difficulty is that, and I think a lot of the anxiety and the angst within an eating and the terror is like arises from that space of you actually know what you need to do, but you just actually cannot get yourself to do it. And that's
Mm.
frustrating. But I think there are a myriad of ways, and everyone's so different, to slowly get yourself to a point where, like, not listening to your intuition is actually harder than just listening to your intuition. In that, like, ultimately, at the end of the day, we have everything that we need inside of us, and our intuition is our guiding light, and we just kind of have to be brave enough to just listen and honor.
Mm,
And like, kind of, I also love adding in the element of play in that. Let's just for today, or just for this moment, let's just see what it feels like to actually just listen to your intuition. And
I love
more
that.
often than not, I have been met with extreme surprises in that, oh my gosh, I listened to my intuition today. No, I did not blow up and balloon and become overweight. Like, that did
Mm,
not happen. In fact, I actually felt calmer because that's actually what I wanted to do. And so my
mm,
parasympathetic nervous system was activated. And so I was a lot calmer and I was actually happier. And therefore I had more energy to go and do something else. So,
beautiful.
and it is this like momentary thing, like, and I think this is where I love the quote with, the 12-step program, in that just for today, like just for this moment,
Yeah.
because so when you're in such a downtrodden state, that's all you can comprehend. That's sometimes
Mm,
still like all I can comprehend is literally just for this moment, like right now, for this last hour, like I'm just here. And it's also a beautiful lesson of mindfulness and meditation as well. So
I think
yeah,
that's
that
how
was
we
a
all get
yeah.
the most out of, every day, learning
Yeah.
to be present and, really just allowing a lot of thoughts to go, come and go like the clouds that they are. It's so freeing. I sort of think the more you mentioned the choice point. Such a great tool, and the more aware we are and the more space that we can get between us and our beautiful intuition or essence or who we are, and the thoughts that are going to take us either towards or away. To me, that's the essence of mental health, that ability to choose. When we are suffering, it's because we largely don't see choice, and that it's a beautiful gift. We've all got it, we can all do it, but someone it, if my thing is to show people and help them to see that, particularly when they're in the hole and they can't they can't see it. I'm just going to put a comment across here for you. um that's from
Oh.
Allison. So you've had quite a few people
Allison.
watching and not left. They're if transfixed. And my beautiful Jeanette
Oh,
wanted to say that to you as well.
thank
And it's
you.
true. So we're going to wrap it up, but I want you to wrap it up if it's all right, because I tried to find your TED talk, and I heard it wasn't out yet, but I heard you talk about the topic, and I'm like, God, I'm like, I can't wait to watch it. Could you tell us just a little bit what it was about, please?
Sure. So it's still in post production. Hopefully, I think October would be when it's released. I hope. But yeah, well, the title of my presentation was "Knowing Thy Voice: The Ultimate Biohack," and so I kind of drew on the parallels of figuratively knowing thy voice and literally knowing your voice. So figuratively, of course, like knowing your morals and your values, and how, as we've already spoken about, knowing thyself is such a fundamental in life. Because if you don't know yourself, then how can you look after yourself, and how can you live an optimal life? So I suppose turning within. So I spoke about that, and I obviously spoke about my story a little bit. But then on a literal level and a biological level, our voice, and well, the main nerve responsible for voice production is the vagus nerve. And of course, that's become a huge buzzword in the health optimization
Hmm.
space, because if you can activate and strengthen your vagus nerve, you are by default activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is when we are resting and digesting. And who isn't stressed today? So I kind of also literally spoke about how we can utilize our voice and how it's a free hack for all of us to help us get into that parasympathetic state and help us through the inevitable stresses that we all experience.
Oh, that's beautiful. And you don't have to be as beautiful a singer as you. You can just sing in the shower. It's just using, yeah, it is. The voice is and it's a great way to play and have fun. I just wanted to mention my daughter quickly because singing is her
Yes.
passion. Yeah. And I think it did for her, really help her, along, her sort of struggles as well. So there's definitely something to that. Um, I could just talk to you all night. I don't want to go, but I know it's probably time to let you go, and I need to go out and feed the troops. Um, it was so beautiful to talk to you. Such a young and inspiring, brave and courageous woman, and you are going to change the world, Kelsey, by being you. And keep growing. Never be afraid to show anyone who you are. We were talking today in my group about There's a man in our group. We love him, Barry. He's in his 70s. He's just divine. He's had huge insights around understanding who he is, and he just says, he would say to you, you're Kelsey, and there's no other Kelsey in this earth. So just be Kelsey and be proud of that. So I'm honored that I got to know you and learn from you, and I can't wait to watch all the amazing things that you do in your life. So thank you for coming and talking to us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm even more honored and grateful to have come across your path and to have been mentored and lectured by you, and your insight and your wisdom. It's literally been life changing. It's really like sealed so much for me. And I'm carrying, you've lit my candle, and now I'm hoping to light more
Pass
candles.
it on. That's it. That's that firefly.
Yeah.
Once it's lit, that's our job now. We spread it out. So that's amazing. Thank you, darling. And thank you, everybody,
Thank
for coming
you.
along for my first live in a long time interview. I think you'll agree it was a great guest, but I look forward to bringing you more as we go along. So thank you, everybody. And thanks, Kelsey. Bye for now.
Thank you.